Welcome, everyone. Glad you can join us today. I'm going to get our closed captions up and running. You guys know by now I hold my breath every time I press the closed captions button. So I'm sure something's going to happen, but all good. So it's up and running in the little red live box if you want to follow along there. Welcome, everyone. I'm Christy Baglow, the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services. And today we get to learn about productivity hacks and time management from one of my favorite trainers, Laura Kelley. So we were just discussing before we launched that Laura has several jobs. So the main two jobs are that she is a partner at the immigration law firm of Duque, Kelley and Associates. And she's also the founder of the Joyful Attorney, which offers personal coaching and a life management skills. So she is wonderful. We're glad to have her back again. You may remember her from our meditation training earlier in the year. So thank you so much for coming back, Laura, and I'll let you take it away.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here with y'all. So today, as you mentioned, we're going to be talking about time management. There is an ethics component of it, and I'm going to go through that relatively quickly. I want to let you know that you can ask questions. I believe the chat is open, but if you have a question and you want to ask it anonymously, you can use the Q&A box. I see it here, and you'll just type that answer as anonymous attendee. So if you want to be anonymous, you need to make sure it has anonymous attendee, and Christy's going to help me kind of manage the presentation and the questions. So let me go ahead and share my screen, get you my presentation ready. So that's my logo. And that's me. Like Christy mentioned, I'm a managing partner. I'm an immigration attorney. I am a professional certified coach, and I'm also a mindfulness instructor. And if you have any questions, you can reach me at laura@thejoyfulattorney.com. And I also have a business WhatsApp number that's 305-482-1294. If you just want to just send me a quick little message and you don't want to do email, that's fine as well. All right, so this is my #1 course that I teach, or some variation on it, whether it includes an ethics component or not. And the reason why is because it transformed my life. And one of the reasons it transformed my life is because as attorneys, as professionals, we suffer from a great deal of decision fatigue. And decision fatigue wears on us, it exhausts us. It's part of just that burnout cycle. So the disorganization plus decision fatigue leads to chaos, right? And I want to talk a little bit. Decision fatigue is this concept that as you have to make more and more decisions in your life, each subsequent decision gets more exhausting. And I want to also have us understand a little evolutionary biology, and that is that our brains are wired, to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and expend as little energy as possible, right? So when we're expending a ton of energy, our brains are like, I do not want this, okay? And another component of decision fatigue to understand is that our brains are not, our thinking is not like net neutral in terms of energy expenditure. So if we are thinking a great deal, we are expending a ton of energy. So to kind of give you some idea about this, our brains are about 3 pounds. So I have like a refillable water bottle here. If it's full, that's about 3 pounds, okay? And yet our brain consumes 25% of our body's energy, right? That's just to give you an idea of just how much energy our brain uses. And a good portion of that is in thinking. So every time you're making a decision, categorizing things or prioritizing things, you are using precious mental energy. And I know you've all had the experience of working a full day of work, going home utterly exhausted, even though you did not leave your chair, right? So that just sets the stage. And so when we're engaging in a lot of inefficient activities that expend our precious brain's energy, we are setting ourselves up for that burnout, that overwhelm, confusion, indecision, exhaustion, and fatigue, right? And when we're in that space of burnout, exhaustion, overwhelm, fatigue, that's how we end up making mistakes. We end up flying off the handle, and we may make some ethical missteps. Now, I know we would say we would never do those things, but we are human beings. We are, we judge ourselves harshly, but I want you to understand that every single one of us is human. We've all engaged in, maybe not flying off the handle, but we've certainly not been kind, and we've all made mistakes, and it's human. This whole presentation is to help us gain some energy back, get some tips so that we can ensure that we are living our life to the fullest, not just professionally, but also personally. Okay. So how are some ways that we exacerbate decision fatigue and exacerbate disorganization? That's by using our email inbox as a to-do list, right? The pitfall of using your email inbox as a to-do list is that you are constantly having to go back to that email inbox to determine what you have to do next, right? And every time you go back to your email inbox, you have more emails. So you have to sort, reprioritize, and decide, right? So that is adding to that mental expenditure. And then same thing as with like electronic to-do lists or even physical to-do lists. When we have lists, they are typically not prioritized, and they do not have an element of how much time it's supposed to take. So we are constantly having to go into that list and evaluate what's next, what's the priority, how long is it going to take me? So every time you go back to that list, even though it's very satisfying to check it off, you are engaging in that mental expenditure, right? Notifications, if you rely on notifications to pop up and let you know what to do next, same things, those can be very interruptive, and also just not a great system for organizing your time. Post-its. Now I have to say, I do love Post-its. I have them on my computer. And we typically use Post-its to kind of just like, oh, I need to remember this. So let me put it on, my computer, my wall, my pages, my desk. But what happens is when we use Post-its or any kind of visual cue of how to remember things, over time, those visual cues disappear, right? We literally become blind to them. They just disappear from our field of vision, and they're no longer something that reminds us of anything. So I would say using Post-its is really best for really short time frames. Like for example, if you're doing Zooms and you need to record them, putting a Post-it to say record right here on the top of your by your camera would work, but just something short, not for something that you need to remember over time. Right. Also, it's important to understand that a lot of our tasks come from perhaps LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Messenger. You also get phone calls, voicemails, text messages. All those things give us tasks. And if we're not centralizing those tasks, they can either wear on us in a burdensome way because we're like vaguely aware that we have these things out there in the ether, or we're going back to them during the day to find out, okay, I had this message, let me go back and figure out what I needed to do with it. And again, just like using the email inbox as a to-do list, it is not an efficient use of our time or energy. Some people use stacks of documents, also the stacks of files, like this is what I have to do. So I have the files as a visual cue, and sometimes they're prioritized by where they are in the stack. Again, that when you have files as a to-do list, that's doesn't tell you how much time each thing is going to take. You may have to reevaluate things. Having that visual clutter on your desk can also be something that you think about that is burdensome, just is not necessarily pleasant. It's not efficient. And yeah, it's just not ideal. And then the other thing is over reliance on staff. If you have staff that helps you out with your calendar or with your appointment making or whatever filings that need to be done, sometimes we rely on staff to let us know, but that's not us taking responsibility and ownership of our time. And it can definitely feel like we are at the effect of our calendar rather than owning our calendar. Okay, so any questions at all about this component? This is just the introduction. Why is this important?
I don't see any questions yet.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to talk about some of the Florida bar rules. That the first one is that's relevant for our purposes is Rule 4-1.3 on diligence. Very simple. A lawyer shall act with reasonable diligence and promptness in representing a client. But what I really wanted to emphasize is the comment to this rule. Okay, a lawyer's workload must be controlled so that each matter can be handled competently, right? That is what we're kind of dealing with here in this presentation. We have to control our workload, and how we control our workload is by managing our time. And when we're managing our time, we're actually managing our minds around time, right? And I love this little thing. Perhaps no professional shortcoming is more widely resented than procrastination. So thank you, Florida Bar. But it's true. And I think that it's important to have these concepts in our mind as we go about learning this time management system that I'm going to talk about today. I'd like to encourage you all to have a learning mindset. And what that means is I'm not telling you the system that you use is wrong. I'm not telling you that my system is better. I'm simply offering you some tips and techniques that may aid you in controlling that workload so that you can handle your work competently, and actually more importantly, so that you're handling your personal life with joy, with deliberateness, with conscious planning, right? We want a purposeful, conscious, deliberate life because it's the only one that we have. So we're not at the effect of external factors. We are responsible for our life and how it goes. Right. So we all know that we also are required to inform our clients of anything important. Basically, we have to just reasonably communicate. Now, I want to talk about that because there's this other aspect, which is boundaries. Our clients are our clients. They do not own our time. They oftentimes feel like they own our time, even in pro bono, retainer agreements. But it's important to understand that in order for us to perform at our best, we need to have boundaries that protect ourselves. Okay. And that means that we are not required to give immediate responses to anybody. Okay. And that we have to provide those reasonable communications to our clients. And that can be a delicate balance. And it's important to understand that just because you feel an urge or you feel an immediacy or eagerness, as my 8-year-old likes to say, she's like, I'm eager. That does not mean we have to stop what we're doing and do that other thing that is provoking those emotions in us. And certainly not if there are external pressures coming from a client. Right? Clients want what they want when they want it because they're human. We all want that, actually. I don't think there's any of us who enjoy waiting. But, that's just not how the world works. And we have to have those boundaries with clients as well as, when we go to the dry cleaners or when we go, standing in line at the grocery store, we have to abide by these rules. And so do our clients. It's also important to understand that whether we are in a supervisory capacity or a supervised capacity, what our responsibilities are. And if you are in a supervisory capacity, you are responsible for the violations of your subordinates, and that includes support staff. And so, ensuring that everyone that you work with is diligent, competent, and managing their workload is important, right? And you're not off of your responsibilities just because you are supervised. Okay. So that is just a review. I know that's not new information. And I also wanted to take a moment to talk about some recent bar discipline cases. Now, these discipline cases come from California. I do presentations throughout the country, and I just picked California. So that's where the issues are exactly the same no matter what the jurisdiction we're in. And these bar rules are variations of the same throughout the country. So those are the Florida bar rules, and these are California disciplinary cases. And I will be happy to send you these full decisions so you can read through them. And I want to say there's no judgment here. Again, I want to go back to the first couple of slides where we're talking about being human. We are lawyers, so we have a high degree of responsibility and obligation to do things correctly and ethically. But I do want us to understand that we are human beings, that mistakes sometimes happen, and that when we are feeling overwhelmed and burned out or confused, indecisive, these are emotions that have a tendency to lead to mistakes being made. And so this is a judgment-free zone, but I want you to feel supported. And of course, nothing here is meant to say like, oh, you're going to make this mistake if you don't follow my system, right? I just want to be clear that this is just an aid to help us understand how things go off the rails. Okay. So in this case, the case of JAD, this person was ultimately suspended for 1 year. Okay. And that 1 year suspension was stayed. So he was essentially suspended for 30 days. And then he was on probation, provided that he followed through with all of the requirements of his probation. Right. And what really happened here is that you can see I have some conclusions of law that came from the decision. But what's important is that this was a very small amount of money. We know that just doing things pro bono or as legal services doesn't prevent us from getting bar complaints. But this dispute that arose for this particular case was $5,000. And so imagine, not being able to practice for 30 days up to a year over a dispute coming from $5,000 just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But essentially, this attorney failed to communicate with his clients, really just didn't even communicate with the bar. And despite the fact that this dispute was very low, and was a very minor issue, right? It was led to bar discipline. And this one was essentially where a matter was settled, and it arose out of a trust dispute. His client was not a part, wanted the case to be dismissed because she wasn't really supposed to be a party. And when they settled, and the plaintiff agreed to dismiss her from the suit, the attorney filed a notice to the court, but never filed the motion to dismiss. and then never let the client know that it was indeed dismissed. And so she was still in the lawsuit for about a year afterwards. And eventually it was taken care of for the client, but she lost a lot of time, a lot of stress, and had to hire a new counsel to complete the work for her. Right. And so we don't know what was going on in JAD's life at the time, but these are very minor, in terms of time, in terms of complexity. These are really minor things that led to this bar discipline. And it just, kind of can be illustrative for us to think about how these little things that maybe we don't give as much importance as we could can snowball. And maybe he had a lot of little cases like this that just snowball, wear on you, and then it becomes really difficult to get out of that inertia of everything going off the rails, right? This one was much more complicated, but still has the exact same implications. This person was actually suspended for a year. He also didn't really respond to the bar when they were communicating with him. It's unclear, again, what was going on in this person's life. But there were two different bar complaints in this case that led to this suspension and disciplinary proceedings. Again, relatively small amounts of money. In one case, there was I believe, an unlawful detainer case, and it really just needed proof of service filed with the court, and he just never filed it. And the client was communicating with him quite a lot, and he just said, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, and it never got done. And it was, I think the amount that he was hired for was $2,500. Very small dispute, very simple solution, and yet it got away from him. And the other one was another dispute that was a settlement dispute. It was a $5,000 matter, and the same thing, just didn't handle it correctly, didn't inform the clients, and led to all these findings by the California bar. Right. So just a mess. And you can, I know we can, from a point of outwardly looking in, we could say this would never happen to me, but these were not brand new practitioners. These were seasoned practitioners. And in every single one of the cases I pulled, they had no prior history of discipline. And so, again, not knowing what was going on in the personal life, we can read the bar discipline records. They come out. I don't know how often they come out where we get sent those emails from the Florida bar, but it happens. And the best way to make sure this doesn't happen to us is by affirmatively taking steps to care for ourselves, right? Self-care, self-maintenance, and not allowing things to pile up and be burdened. If you have any indication that you're feeling burnt out, it's important to take steps to rectify that, because it doesn't get better on its own, right? That's the one thing we know. These things just pile up and pile up and pile up. They don't get better on their own. And when you start to understand a little psychology, sometimes we don't even, when things get overwhelming, we don't even like to look at it. And so that's going to come to play when we get into the time management aspect of this. But, it seems insane, right? Both of these people didn't even respond to the bar initially when the bar contacted them about the discipline or the bar complaint. And it's like, how does that even happen? Well, sometimes, if you can imagine when someone's going through a lot of debt, right? You can imagine those bills coming in, and they stack up, pile up, and it can be extremely overwhelming to get to it and look at it. And the more they pile up, the more overwhelm is felt. the more dread is felt, and the less and less likely becomes the capacity to go there and look at it and deal with it, right? It becomes like, you know, insurmountable. And so while looking at it right now, we would say, I would never not respond to the bar. We don't know how much overwhelm and dread these individuals were experiencing. I mean, because we know they're not stupid. You know, they are, you know, licensed attorneys. Okay, and then the last one I have here is matter of MAH. Again, this is another person who never had any prior cases of bar discipline, and this gentleman was actually disbarred. Now, this bar discipline case went a lot further than the other two in that he did misappropriate client funds. So the client received a settlement. He did not inform the client that the settlement funds were received, didn't render an accounting, didn't maintain those funds in trust. They were, you know, cashed out, and then ultimately he had to replenish it. The funds were replenished, but by that time it was too late. And so, again, it's unclear what was happening in this person's life. And, you know, as attorneys, I know that we've seen colleagues and people get overextended. I know we would never, ever, ever misappropriate, but, you know, these are things that we have to be aware of, that overextension in our time can lead to overextension in our debts. It can lead to, you know, all kinds of things that may lead, in the worst cases, to bar discipline or even criminal prosecution. And I want to say something else, that so what we see in our practice, what I see in our practice, is that some of our colleagues are so overwhelmed, so overburdened, that they use substances as an aid, either to avoid difficult emotions or in order to work more efficiently, right? So maybe alcohol in order to, you know, kind of numb the stress, or perhaps, well, I know that some attorneys have used Adderall or cocaine or methamphetamines in order to work more efficiently, right? And so many things, so many negative things can be a consequence of that kind of substance abuse. And it doesn't start with, I'm going to be, you know, an addict, but it starts with, this is just helping me temporarily deal with what's going on for me. And it goes further from there. So nip it in the bud sooner rather than later, so that we can be our best selves, be our best attorneys, and be really present in our personal lives for our friends, our families, ourselves, right? So any questions about that? Like I said, I'm going to send you the bar discipline if you're interested in it. I just wanted to highlight some cases where that overwhelm, that processes can be very, very overwhelming. And I wanted to illustrate a couple of cases that let you know, that this has really dire consequences and effects.
I don't see any questions. Everyone's being shy, but remember, if you want to ask anonymously, you can click on the Q&A box and check the anonymous box.
Thank you so much, Christy. All right, so your thoughts about time affect your time management. So oftentimes we mistakenly believe that our circumstances are what create our feelings about our time. So obviously it's my schedule that is causing me to feel overwhelmed or feel dread. It's the circumstance of my workload or my schedule. And I'm here to tell you that that is a misunderstanding of our mind. It is not the circumstances that cause our feelings. There's something that is intervening in that process, and that is our thoughts, right? Our thoughts are what cause our feelings, not our circumstances. And I'm going to just illustrate a few points about how our thoughts can affect our feelings. So I'm going to repeat some of these phrases. You can close your eyes or not close your eyes, but I just like for you, as I say them, to kind of go into the body, like, and feel what comes up when I say them, right? There's not enough time in the day. It's crunch time. Time is running out. Time and tide wait for no man. Time is money. You wasted my time. I have a tight deadline. This project is due now. Right? How did those feel? So even though we're in like a safe space, nothing's due at this moment in time. You may have some deadlines looming, but in this very moment, we're here doing this presentation and it feels bad, right? It doesn't feel great to hear those thoughts, to think those thoughts. Right? Debbie says stressful feelings can cause anxiety. Exactly. These thoughts do not feel good, right? And so we may take a circumstance like the brief is due on Friday, and that is a fact, that is a factual statement, but our thoughts about it are what cause our feelings, not the fact that it's due, right? So if I'm thinking time is running out, then that's what's producing that feeling of, I don't know, fear, dread. Yeah. So Vilma says, it felt like time is so limited. Michelle feels anxious. Exactly. Now I'm going to flip it and I'm going to say some other thoughts. I want you to do the exact same thing, close your eyes or not, and just feel how these thoughts feel. Time is on my side. There's plenty of time to get this done. Good things take time. The two most powerful warriors are patience and time. The most precious resource we all have is time. Now, I've done this presentation before, and the what I normally get is that they don't believe these thoughts. All right, but for Michelle and Vilma, yes, you those felt good. I love it. But sometimes people say no. They're so some, and it's fine, no judgment. But if you're really stuck on like a negative thought cycle, even these thoughts are like, it doesn't feel real. Yeah, Christy says she was skeptical. Right. So it's Debbie asked, how do you create those thoughts? That's exactly what you have to do, is create those thoughts. And I have a whole program on mastering your mind, an upcoming course on that. And that really talks about how we change our thoughts. But a nugget for you is that we have to, sometimes if these thoughts are not believable to you, we have to find a neutral thought to kind of replace that negative thought. And actually, even before then, we just have to gain awareness that it's our thoughts that are causing our feelings, not the circumstances. So somebody with the exact same schedule or the exact same deadline as you may feel differently, right? For me, getting up at 4:45 in the morning to work out is normal. For a lot of other people, that is insane, right? So it's not the time that a person wakes up that causes those feelings. It's the thoughts that we have about them. And so when you can recognize that it's not the circumstances, you start to be able to entertain the possibility that there is another way forward. And that other way is by thinking neutral or positive thoughts that allow you to feel differently, right? And so if you can't think rather that there's plenty of time, then maybe you can think there is time. And one way you can start to make these thoughts feel real, feel possible, is by implementing some of the strategies that I have for time management. And when you start to say, perhaps a thought could be, I am capable of managing my time. I feel capable, or I keep saying I'm so sorry. I am capable of scheduling my time. I'm capable of following through with my calendar. Those are thoughts that create better feelings that lead to more productive actions and better results. Okay. Because the thoughts like there is not enough time, the feeling that produces is likely dread, overwhelm, fear. And the actions that come directly from that usually are avoidance because those feelings are unpleasant. So whenever we have unpleasant emotions, our natural tendency is to avoid those pleasant emotions. And so that's where you have procrastination, you have maybe drinking, overeating, just any kind of activity to avoid feeling that feeling. And what ends up happening is it actually ends up taking you more time. And so you prove the thought that there's not enough time because you're avoiding the task that's produced, because you're thinking the thought there isn't enough time. So there's a whole course on mind mastery about that. So this is a taste. But yes, Monique says the positive thoughts, the capable thoughts create ownership too. And that's absolutely right. And that is the key. When you feel obligated in your life, when you feel like you don't have choices, when you feel like you're the effect of your workload and your time and your calendar, you feel disempowered. When you truly can believe that you are capable of scheduling, of taking control, of being responsible, you are, empowered, you are owning your life, you're owning your time. And it makes a tremendous difference over time. All right. So this is my time management system. I also call it what my coach taught me, which is called Monday Hour One. It's very catchy, Monday Hour One, but I have changed what I was taught to be more flexible for attorneys because one of the things that my coach taught me was that emergencies involve blood. If it doesn't involve blood, it's not an emergency. Well, as attorneys, we know that emergencies involve a whole host of things that do not involve blood, but they definitely can involve calls from the judge, emergency hearings, deadlines that are imposed with very short notice, detained clients. There's a lot of true emergencies that do not involve blood. And so there's also just the reality of practice. That means we have to have a more flexible approach than what I was taught. So I switched it up a little bit. And again, in line with that idea of learning mindset, I want you to know that you can modify these tips, tools, techniques in a way that works for you. I just want you to really think about whether you're modifying them because that's what works for you versus that's what your brain telling you this way is too hard. So let's take the easy way, right? Just be aware of what your brain is offering you. Remember, in evolutionary psychology, our brain avoids pain, seeks pleasure, and expends as little energy as possible as the default. So anything new we have to do, we have to get over that motivational triad, right? So what I hope you're able to learn from this is how to use your prefrontal cortex or your modern brain to make decisions by planning ahead, as opposed to the amygdala or the primitive brain that kind of runs on impulse, right? You will learn how to honor your commitments to yourself. You will learn to live your life deliberately, plan your time consciously, and follow through with what you say you're going to do for yourself. Now, so often in our lives, We put ourselves last. We put everyone else first. We are more than willing to cancel on ourselves if we have a commitment to, work out, go to lunch, get a manicure, get a massage, go for a walk, whatever it is. We are more than willing to take a rain check on ourselves. And part of this plan is to recognize that we have to put ourselves first, our personal time, our free time first. This is our one life we get, and we need to bring joy into it. We need to bring pleasure into it, real pleasure, not that false pleasure of avoidant behaviors that end up actually creating net negative consequences in our lives. Okay, real pleasure as opposed to false pleasure from avoidance. All right, so you want to start this process. So I'm going into teaching you how to tie this new time management system. Right, we start with a thought download or a to-do list download, however you want to name it. And I recommend doing this on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, or Monday morning. We're at just an hour before your work week begins, right? Is the key. So, if you want to get the ball rolling on a Monday, which is what I do, I don't do my Monday hour one tasks on Monday morning. I like to do them the day before, right? And as you go along this process, it'll take less time. But just initially, you want to start with 1 hour of distraction-free time. And when I mean distraction-free time, I really mean, turning off your notifications, all of them, turning off your phone, and really commit to spending this time to get your schedule sorted for the week, right? I also recommend using a blank sheet of paper to write everything down. And that's because at the end of this, you're going to rip it up. And that can be very cathartic, especially if you're someone who likes to check lists check tasks off of lists. It can be very cathartic to then rip up this piece of paper, right? And so what you're going to do with this piece of paper is you're going to identify and write down all of the tasks that you need to accomplish. Now, if you haven't done this before, right, if you don't have this running list, this running to-do list, it can be very time intensive. And I would recommend getting all the tasks you have, not just for the week coming up, but if you have any larger projects or deadlines that are coming up in the preceding weeks or months, go ahead and put those in as well, right? And you want to go into all of those inboxes that we identified, in the first slide. So if you have your email inbox, you have your messages inbox, maybe your voicemail inbox, you want to use your other inputs like the if you have files on your desk that you're using, your Post-its, you just want to consolidate them all into one place, that sheet of paper. Doesn't have to be a sheet of paper. You can do it electronically as well. But if you want to rip it up, that piece of paper. All right. And I want you to continuously ask yourself, what else? What am I missing? I have to go pick up the dry cleaning. I have this date night on Friday. I have to go to the grocery store. I really need to wash my car. All of those little things actually need to go on this to-do list, because it's not just about your work tasks. It's also your personal tasks. All right. Once you have that complete list, then you're going to determine what your priorities are for this week, right? Either, highlighting them or just determining what is for this week and what can be filed away for later long-term action items. So if they're emails, maybe you archive them, maybe you keep a separate running to-do list. I do have a paper calendar where I like to keep my running to-do list. So every week I'm moving that forward and utilizing that to help the process go a little smoother when I'm doing this Monday hour one process. And I also want you to think about, what do you really want to do? What's important to you? Once you know what's important to you, that helps you prioritize. If you have long-term projects, Maybe you have something that's due in 3 weeks. You want to break that project down into smaller pieces. And then you want to put those smaller pieces on your list and then on your calendar. Right. So again, breaking projects into manageable pieces allows us to get it done, with time, as opposed to waiting to the last minute to get it done. Right. So once you're ready, once you have your list going, you're going to start adding the action items to your calendar. Right. And I'm going to first talk about it, and then I'm going to show you it. Right. And then we can talk about it again if you need to. Right. So the first thing that's going to go on your calendar in a block format is adding your personal time and your free time first. Okay. And that means all the things that are important to you that need to get done, you're going to put that first. Just like the book Profit First, you put your free time first, right? And make sure those are priorities for you. And I'm using an electronic calendar to do this. I do recommend an electronic calendar, particularly if you use an electronic calendar in your office for appointments. If you are sharing your calendar with coworkers or supervisors or support staff, they need to be knowing what you're doing when you're doing it. And so an electronic calendar manages that. In my office, we use the Google Calendar as part of the G Suites. I know a lot of people use Outlook. There are other calendars available. Now, if you are the only person that looks at your calendar, then you don't and you are opposed to electronic calendars, no problem. You can certainly use a paper calendar. Okay, and the same process works for a paper calendar. And in fact, there's a number of planners that follow this format that start from like 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. or later that you can use to do this block scheduling. So someone says, my office has paralegals attending. Does scheduling personal time apply to them as well? Yes. So for me, because we use G Suites, and I'm going to show you, I use 2 different calendars. I have my personal calendar that is integrated with my email. And then I have my work calendar that's integrated with my work email. So I have my personal email and my work email. And it's in my calendar. For me, when I view it, both calendars are integrated, but my coworkers can only see my work email, right? And so if you have the capacity to do that, then I would do that. Now, if you are not able to integrate your personal time or put, your own private tasks on your calendar, then yes, I would say do not put that on your work calendar. And maybe you can find a way to integrate those 2 things. So if you are somebody who has a set schedule, that you're only working from 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever your schedule is, maybe, that's your work schedule. Obviously, personal time's not going to go into that generally. And then you can use the same techniques for your personal calendar and maybe putting that on a paper calendar or your own electronic calendar. So whatever works for you. For me, my work calendar and my personal calendar must be integrated. That's what I have on my phone. So when I look at my phone, I know exactly what needs to be done where. And, I do a lot of driving, a lot of hearing, so I'm moving around. I need all of that stuff together. And again, I'm going to show you how my personal calendar integrates with my work calendar. Once you have that, you want to add your hearings, meetings, phone calls, appointments, and email review periods. I think that's really important. Now, if you are like me, if you do attend hearings, if you do attend client appointments and client phone calls, those things may already be on your calendar, right? We don't wait until Monday to schedule them typically. We typically schedule them in advance. And so they're already on that calendar. So you're not going to have to add them. They're already there. And then you're going to work around those. I was mentioning to Christy that I have hearings for immigration court out until 2025. So they're already in my calendar. All my hearings are in my calendar. So we work around those. right? And then something else that is extremely beneficial is called focus time. Focus time is where you can add a 2-hour distraction-free block of time in order to accomplish creative endeavors. When I say creative endeavors, I'm talking about research, writing, marketing, studying, anything that we produce um, in our work life. All right. So it's 2 hours is particularly important because it's it allows us to get flow, it allows us to get momentum, and it is just generally um, for creative processes a good chunk of time. So if you're motion writing, brief writing, researching, it's really nice to put in these chunks of time for you to um, really get fleshed out, right? You know that if you're writing, you need to do outlines, you need to do, um, you know, all the steps that you need to take in order to get this done. So, and if you have, for example, something like a motion or a brief that is particularly onerous, or it's going to require a lot of time, maybe you're not going to finish it in 2 hours, you can have multiple blocks of time. And that's what I was mentioning in the last slide. You want to plan it out when you're going to do it. um, the the other thing is that within that 2-hour block of time, you're going to want to break that time down further as well. So you do not want to put something on your calendar that says write brief or write motion or research case law, right? You want to put it in a way that demonstrates what will be done in that chunk of time. So if you need an hour to outline a brief, for example, you're going to say, outline brief. If you're going to do research issue, and you're going to write down which issue, and you're going to break it down by time periods. How long do you anticipate this taking you? And you're going to put that into the calendar, right? When you are in focus time, it is incredibly important to eliminate interruptions and distractions and notifications. So I know a lot of you work with people, you may have supervisors, you're like, I can't do that. I suggest if this is something you would like to try for your time, is to communicate these desires to your team. That means, maybe letting them know from 2 to 4 on Friday, I'm going to be unavailable because I'm working on this project and I really need to focus. So I'm going to have my phone off. If you need something, please contact me before or after, right? Just letting people know and be aware of what you're up to. That may not work for everybody. And if it doesn't work for you, I'm not saying, this is the only way to be successful as an attorney or a paralegal, right? But if you are interested in trying this, the best way to try it is through communicating with your team, right? I also think it's really important to add periods of overflow time or space for unanticipated tasks. Sometimes we need to leave space for appointments that may happen or phone calls that may happen. So we need to leave that into our calendar. So this is an idea of what it looks like. All right. If this alarms you, I'm going to offer you the acronym BRO. Breathe, relax, open. Breathe, relax, open. Okay. This is just an example. And I know that for some people looking at this, it feels very overwhelming. But I want you to understand that once you start utilizing this process, it is actually liberating because you know exactly what you need to do and when you need to do it and how long it's going to take you. And then you move on to the next thing. It is important to put in breaks if you need breaks, right? It's important that you have contingency plans, right? So if one thing I get is that my clients tell me I could not possibly do this because I don't know how long things are going to take me. Right. You can estimate how long things are going to take you. You put that in the calendar. And if it takes you less time, excellent. You can, do something else in the time that you are finished, right? It's a little contingency. Maybe do something that you had later in the day earlier, or an admin task that you forgot to calendar. If it takes, and I know that you're not worried about things taking less time than you put in the calendar. I know that you're worried about them taking more time than what you put in the calendar. And it's okay. You're learning from this process, how long things take you. And you have to be flexible and find time for that task in another place. But the whole point is to continue doing this and working this process so you're able to learn how long things take you. And there's a concept, and I wonder if I can't remember if it's on the next slide, but there's a concept called Parkinson's law. It's not really a law, but it is a law, just like Murphy's law. And Parkinson's law says work expands to fill the time allotted, right? So if you say it's going to take you all day to clean your house, it's going to take you all day to clean your house. If you say it's going to take you 3 weeks to write a brief, it's going to take you 3 weeks to write a brief, right? And we also have something called the productivity paradox. And it's as we expand work, we actually become less productive. The more we work, the less productive we become, right? So having these internal deadlines for ourselves about how long things are going to take us help us be more efficient with our time, right? They're not chains, right? You're not going to be enslaved to the time period that you put in your calendar. But over time, you're learning to be more efficient. This also gives you the idea of taking a look at your schedule, right? Remember, I was talking about earlier about how our workload, how our tasks can all become overwhelming. It can be like it's become so much that we can't take control of it over it, and we don't want to look at it. This is the process of looking at it, right? This is a processing of getting real with our time, because one way or the other, all the tasks that we have, they have to get done. Well, let me rephrase that. We choose to get them done. We don't have to do anything. You can absolutely walk away from your jobs right now. It's a choice. Nobody has to do anything. You don't have to do anything. Now, granted, there are consequences for actions and inactions, but everything is a choice. And so if you choose to do your work, you choose to do these tasks, they're going to get done. And the question is, do you want to get them done with ownership, with self-control, with deliberation, or would you rather just be at the effect of your calendar doing them, erratically or chaotically? Those are the questions you have to answer for yourself. So I'm just going to stop my share and I'm going to show you my screen because I have an example of my calendar. Now I would love to show you my real calendar because it shows you how it works in motion, but due to confidentiality, I don't want to get, violate any ethical rules of the Florida bar. I cannot show you my calendar, but this is my fate calendar. And but it works much the same way. And I'm going to show you the interplay of my personal calendar and my work calendar. So here this is my personal calendar, and this really is my personal calendar, right? And this was from September 12th, the week of September 12th, where I'm showing you kind of how it would work. So I have here, this is my work schedule. So you can see I have hearings, I put in commute times, I put workout times. Maybe get ready and commute may not be what you are working out. It's not what you want to put in your work schedule. That's fine. For this example, that's what I put in my work calendar. Sometimes I like for my staff to understand that I need time to get ready and commute. So I need them to not put interviews or phone calls in those time periods, right? I also have the 14th as like a consult day. So I've put here consult 1, consult 2, lunch, consult 3, consult 4, consult 5. I also have periods of reading and responding to emails. I typically believe that you should put time periods in which you will read and respond to emails so that you're not doing it throughout the day. And so it's not interrupting your flow. And, if you are, if you finish something early, by all means, check your email. But, if you are attending a hearing, you're not checking your email. So if you're working on a task, I would also offer, perhaps that's not the best use of your time to be checking your email when you're supposed to be researching or writing, right? I also have case review periods in my calendar because that's when my staff will send me things to review. They put it in my calendar. So if I pull this up, this is Google Notes. They can edit the event. They all have permission to do that. And in here, they will type and send links to our Dropbox about what I need to review, right? And it fits into that. I have in here Friday hour done. We're going to talk about that as well. I have meetings. Again, any out of the office meetings need to have commute times. Then I'm going to show you real quick personal time, right? So in this work calendar, I did put wind down time. That should have been personal. But that is, one of the most important things I think that we should be doing for ourselves is prioritizing our sleep. And so to prioritize sleep, we need to work backwards. We need to determine how much sleep we need. And then we have to set our bedtimes from that. For me, I need at least 7 hours of sleep. So my wind down time actually begins at 9 p.m. rather, where I disconnect from all devices and I read in bed and then I go to sleep. Okay. But of course, and then I have to wake up at 4:45. I have my morning sit. That's my meditation. I have my workouts here. I have some other tasks. I have, a massage and a facial scheduled. I have some other things scheduled. So those are my personal time. You don't have to be super, you don't have to be super strict about your personal time, but if it's something that you want to accomplish, I do recommend calendaring it in some form or fashion. Again, if you only have access to a work calendar, please don't, your coworkers don't want to see your personal time and you probably don't want to share that. But you can utilize the same exact method in another format. And I've got some questions here, so I'm just going to take a look. Okay, sorry, those are not questions. Okay. So that's the idea. I'm going to stop the share on there. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. All right. So as you're planning, right, once you plan your week, all right, you're going to file all actions that require no immediate action into a waiting file, into a running to-do list, or archive it in email. And I'm going to give you another tip. If you're somebody who has thousands of notifications in your email, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you take all emails that are unread, that are older than 30 days, and archive them. Just archive them. You still have search functionality. They're not disappearing anywhere. They're just out of your inbox. And in fact, any email you don't need, just archive it. And that way, and then you can put time in your calendar to work through the emails that are there, the 30 days, delete, archive, and deal with so that you can maintain control over your email inbox. The whole purpose of the notifications is to let you know that something's new, that something requires your attention. When you have hundreds or thousands of notifications, it's not serving its purpose for you. And it can be very overwhelming to go into an inbox that is disorganized. So again, not saying you're doing anything wrong, just want to offer you a different perspective and an alternative to get a handle on those emails, right? So don't be afraid of archiving. Most of us have email inboxes that can handle all of that. You also want to establish a process for the open items that go beyond a week. So those are those larger projects. Again, that process can be breaking those projects into chunks and calendaring them as necessary. I also suggest discussing your system, your calendaring system with your support staff, with your coworkers, with your supervisors on an as-needed basis. Once you have everything from your to-do list download, calendared or archived or in your running to-do list for later on, perhaps next week or the week after, I want you to tear up that thought download and start fresh, right? If you've done it on paper. The beauty of this system is that you don't have to worry anymore about what needs to get done for the week. It's all right here. You're not using your precious mental time thinking, deciding, prioritizing throughout the course of the day. You're able to free up that energy to actually do your work or to enjoy your life. Like, it's not all about work, right? So that you're less exhausted at the end of the day. You have time to be present for yourself, for your friends, and your family. Okay, because that, again, that mental energy is not net neutral. It is an expenditure, right? And the last step of this is at the end of the week, at your last hour of your work week, I recommend doing an hour process, maybe less, called Friday Hour Done. And I want you to really celebrate 3 accomplishments from the week, because changing your schedule, changing your processes for time management is really hard. It's a process. It's not supposed to be easy. It takes time. It's not going to be perfect. And so celebrating those accomplishments is really important. Your brain will beat you up for any like possible negative thing it perceives, right? Your brain is a master at beating yourself up for any little tiny thing. So we can hack that by celebrating every small accomplishment that we have. And that helps us to rewire our brain from having a negativity bias to having a positivity bias. So I want you to actually do that, to really celebrate, like, yeah, maybe it wasn't perfect, but these are the 3 things that I really was able to do and I feel accomplished about it. And again, practice makes progress, not perfection. So I want you to really think about what didn't work, anticipate obstacles, and incorporate all this into your next week's planning, right? You're going to identify any other open projects that happened, after your week was scheduled, and utilize a system for collecting tasks for the week ahead. I call that my running to-do list. Asana is great. You can use your notes. You can use a paper to-do list. I know you said, Laura, you said not to use a to-do list. I'm saying don't use a to-do list to work through your tasks. This is a running to-do list that collects them for you so that your Monday hour 1 for next week is much more easy and fast, right? It's not going to take you an hour for the rest of your life to do this. And as you get better about collecting your tasks, when you're doing that process of identifying all of your inputs and inboxes, it's going to be it's going to be easier. All right, so I'm going to have some tips. Tip number 1 is not to take unscheduled phone calls. I really mean that. I do not take unscheduled phone calls. Begrudgingly, sometimes from colleagues, I will take them because those are typically the people who have my my cell phone number. But I definitely utilize my support staff to schedule my calls. If you do not have support staff to screen your calls, and I do recommend allowing things to go to voicemail, and you can call back in a time that is set forth in your calendar for returning calls. Okay. Set specific times to read and respond to email and return calls. Perhaps adding a disclaimer to your email. I put mine. I don't do it as an automatic response. I think that's annoying. That's my thought. You may have different thoughts. So my thought is it's a little aggressive. So I put in my email just my typical response time for emails is 1 to 2 business days. Just have it there. So when we have communication, people can know what to expect in terms of my response rate. Establish contingency plans, anticipate emergencies, be realistic about what an emergency is. So just because a client believes something's urgent doesn't make it an emergency, right? Delegate tasks to the extent that you can. Recognize that completion creates momentum. So the more tasks that you're able to complete on your calendar, the better you're going to feel about it, and the more momentum you're going to have to continue this process. Because again, it is hard to get started. It can be, can seem, like insurmountable or super difficult, but I want you to recognize that those are just thoughts. That's not true. You absolutely can do it. It takes time. You just have to bypass that motivational triad of your brain wanting to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and expend as little energy as possible. And perhaps one thought could be is that this will absolutely save time. It will save time. It will save your mental energy. It will really allow you to take charge and control of your work and personal life. And so when you don't want to do it, the other part of it is creating those thoughts that about why this is so compelling, why this is so important, and working from that space rather than the I don't want to do it space. Right. I mentioned I have some upcoming courses. I know that Christy shared my website, but I have courses on time management for legal professionals. So if you have this works for attorneys or paralegals, doesn't have the ethics component. So if you want to share that, I'm doing that on Friday. I'm also doing one about boundaries in the law, like boundaries in our practice. I'm doing one on a money mindset, setting goals. That mastering your mind is about, how we can change our thoughts. I also have one that is a professionalism credit, mindful communication for lawyers. So if you're looking for professionalism credit, we've got that for you. And also one about procrastination. So I have some thoughts and I'm going to take questions. It's uncomfortable to do new things. It's uncomfortable to do these processes, but you can do them. I'd like for you to consider the possibility that discomfort is the currency of your dreams and that whatever we resist persists. So that idea of resisting negative emotion actually makes negative emotion to persist in our lives. I like to say this, you don't need permission and you don't need doubt. But how we get started there is by acknowledging the truth about where we are right now. You don't know where you're going if you don't know where you are. And so don't be afraid to look, whether it's debt, whether it's time, no matter what it is, just don't be afraid to look. Right. So I'm going to stop the share and see.
Wonderful presentation as always. Isn't she great, everyone? Got lots of compliments in the chat. Before we take questions, I did want to announce the CLE number before I forget. It's 2107895 N as in Nancy. Again, that's 2107895 N as in Nancy. I'll send that in the follow-up email. And I'll also send links to all the upcoming trainings. I highly recommend her longer trainings. They're fantastic.
Thank you so much, Christy. And I see what's the last word in Parkinson's law? Let me just put simply, the amount of work required adjusts to the time available for its completion.
So true.
Things take as long as you put it on there.
Yes. If you leave it open-ended, you're in trouble. It's going to take forever.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So I'll send the recording and the PowerPoint and the links to all the upcoming trainings in the follow-up email tomorrow. And you can always reach out to me if you have other questions. But thank you so much for doing this, Laura. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Again, I want to say that the reason why I teach this content is because it changed my life. And I believe in it. And I really do believe that it can transform other people's lives as well. So take what works for you in it and don't be afraid to shift your perspective.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much. I hope you can see all the compliments in the chat. Hope you have
you
a
so
good
much.
afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, Christy. Bye, everyone.